Part 19. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 181. Chapter 181. Of course you can do whatever you want. Seong-soo couldn't stand such a look, he would immediately resist. But the necklace around his neck was almost embedded in the leather bag, and it looked very scary. Even the two followers beside him put down the female classmates in their hands and walked to Fu Wenzi's side, but they didn't know how to save Seong-soo. Tang Wan looked at Fu Wenzi, who was taller than him, and felt a little surprised. Fu Wenzi doesn't like to be in the limelight at all. Suddenly Tang Wan seemed to realize something, and the expression on Fu Wenzi's face in the hospital flashed before his eyes. Is it possible that you are worried about yourself? She remembered what Lu Ziyi said. They are willing to face danger with themselves, they just hope that they can pay more attention to their own safety. Thinking of this, Tang Wan's pupils trembled slightly. Fu Wenzi didn't say it like Lu Ziyi did, he just really did it. This is more precious than any promise. The two senior classmates didn't dare to pick on Fu Wenzi. For no one else, Seong-soo looked like he was suffocating in Fu Wenzi's hands, and his face turned blue. They were afraid that Seong-soo would suffer even more if they took action. The female classmate on the side did not leave. She just found a place to hide, then set up her mobile phone and took pictures of everything in front of her. Seong-soo always looks for this kind of corner where there is no surveillance and no people. And he broke several of his cell phones. This time, she specially took two mobile phones, destroyed one for them and hid the other. Just be prepared to find opportunities to film what they do and expose their evil deeds. Everything must be based on evidence. Even if she wants to deal with these people, she must have the evidence ready. Let them have no chance to stand up. It's just that the perpetrator now seems to be the male classmate. The female classmate thought for a while, adjusted the angle, covered Fu Wenzi's body, and focused the camera on the two discipline committee members. Then record their voices. Let go, you have no manners at all when you treat a senior like this. The movements of Fu Wenzi's hands did not change, but his voice sounded a little confused. How could it be? I just saw the senior ignoring the school rules and wanted to help him. As he spoke, he was about to tear off the necklace around Seong-soo's neck with his hands. That is a silver necklace. If it is torn around the neck will definitely bleed from the friction. At the same time, Tang Wan also called the police. The moment they heard the siren sounding, no one reacted. Different from what Tang Wan knew, they generally would not go to the police. After all, in Jingqiao, if a telephone pole falls down, it will hit several officials. Who wants to get into such trouble? So when they received the alarm call from Lingyun College, the police in the suburbs of Beijing were a little unresponsive. Had it not been for the familiarity of the alarm call, they would have thought it was someone's prank. After all, at Lingyun School, it was usually not their turn to take action, and everyone had already solved the problem privately. It just so happened that Sci-fi was also here to take care of something today. Just before the police officers came out, he heard a number he was familiar with. I followed him out. Seong-soo's face suddenly turned ugly. He glared at Tang Wan fiercely and said, "Did you call the police?" "How can you call the police?" Tang Wan raised her eyebrows. Before she could write down what she wanted to say, Fu Wenzi said it for her, "Why can't you call the police? We have been taught since childhood, aren't we, to call the police when we encounter evil forces?" This sentence even sounded a bit childlike, but it seemed a little funny in the scene before me. Seong-soo's expression looked like he had eaten a few flies, and he looked very smelly. When Sci-fi arrived at the scene, he looked at the person in Fu Wenzi's hands, then at Tang Wan who was being protected by Fu Wenzi, and asked, "What's going on?" Tang Tang had just come out of the hospital, why did someone come to bully her again? The girl who was hiding rushed out. She took out her mobile phone and quickly said everything in front of her. She didn't give Seong Sisu and his little follower the time to confuse right and wrong. "Police uncle, I want to report it." This senior classmate, relying on his position as the student council president, forced my sister to take tutoring, and even asked my sister to pay him for tutoring. If my sister doesn't give it to him, he calls for someone to beat my sister, insults my sister for her poor grades, and uses verbal violence against her. Tang Wan then realized that the female classmate in front of her was not someone who would be easily bullied. She has actually been waiting for an opportunity to expose these people. The policeman saw that the female classmate's clothes were a little crooked, and his face darkened. "Your sister?" "Yes." The girl took off the glasses on her face, and her pair of pink and phoenix eyes looked very bright. "And the person who was shivering just now are like two people. My sister is a 4th grade student in this school, and he has forced her not to come to class. I came in disguised as my sister. I wanted to know how my sister lives in school and what kind of grievances she has suffered. Did not expect." At this point, the girl bit her lower lip hard and said in a disgusted tone, "I didn't expect such a scum to come out of the school." Sci-fi looked at Tang Wan, who looked particularly petite among these people, pushed the wheelchair to her side, and asked in a low voice, "Then what are you doing here?" Tang Wan tilted his head, raised the tablet in his hand, and read on it, "Do good things to others." The side also affirmed Tang Wan's action. "This little classmate is very good. She is here to help me. She is a good person." Sci glanced at Fu Wenzi, then at Tang Wan, snorted coldly, and immediately figured out what was going on. Probably Tang Wan's blood for justice began to boil again, and he came out to punish evil and promote good. As for Fu Wenzi, he probably followed Tang Wan all the time to help her. Just looking at Seong Sisu, who was almost suffocating in Fu Wenzi's hands, Sci said angrily, "Let him go and let the police handle it." Fu Wenzi immediately let go of his hand after hearing this. Seong Sisu just fell to the ground. Cough cough, cough cough. He covered his throat, his cheeks were red, and it was obvious that he had not recovered yet. Fu Wenzi still had a smile on his face. Even when he had just made such a brutal move, the expression on his face was so gentle. It's just superficial, without any real feeling. Suddenly Tang Wan seemed to have thought of something and raised the tablet in his hand with something written on it. "Can I have someone fire him?" Seong Sisu's eyes widened with red bloodshot eyes, and finally he sneered unconvincingly, "Expelling me? Expelling someone from this school requires the consent of the 3 directors' families. You are the only one." "Sure." Before Seong Sisu finished speaking, Fu Wenzi interrupted him. "Pei family, Si family, Lu family." Seong Sisu's body suddenly stiffened. He stared at Fu Wenzi blankly, and he no longer looked as calm and composed. "Exactly 3. Thanks Jinziwenzi's Habayazai for the reward. I love you so much. Thanks to Wanung Xiaotang, Xiaoyang Kaorin, nice, book friends 2020042119045397, and Jinzi Wanzizi for their monthly votes. Love you. Good night, I'm so sleepy." The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 182. Chapter 182 Consulting Department. Seong Sisu suddenly broke away from the policeman who was restraining him. The expression on his face became very ferocious, and he was still shouting, "Impossible! How can she represent so many boards of directors by herself?" Sci picked up Tang Wan and placed her on his lap. He took out a wet wipe and wiped her face. Then subconsciously put away the dirty tissues and looked for an opportunity to throw them away. However, Tang Wan stretched out his hand and put away the dirty wet wipes. Sci twirled his fingertips to wipe away the moisture from his fingertips. Finally, His cold eyes fell on Xiang Sizu, and he slowly said, "Why not? The Si family has no descendants, so I gave my rights to Tang Tang. Children of the Lu family can also use Director Lu's rights in school. As for the Pei family." Si Huai's eyes fell on Fu Wenzi and sneered, "Director Pei's power lies with Fu Wenzi, and he will not fail to support Tang Tang." Si Huai rarely said so many words in one breath. Compared to those uncivilized fights, he preferred to look down at the struggling prisoners with a condescending attitude. He is willing to put his and his lover's treasures on the altar. He wanted Tang Wan to appear in front of everyone. Compared to a brat like Fu Wenzi, Si Huai thought further than him. He knew that Tang Wan inherited Xuemina's character and her stubbornness, and the faith that will never be abandoned. Then it is very likely that Tang Wan will also follow Xuemina's old path. She might have set a goal for herself long ago, which is to activate those dusty warning signals. Si Huai has been paying attention to Tang Wan's life from the beginning. After she accepted the spring flower party, Si Huai originally thought that Tang Wan had given up on the idea. After all, if you want to be an eyeliner, the first thing you have to do is not attract attention. Otherwise Xuemina would not have been saying that she was in poor health and had been bedridden for a long time when she was a student. But just when Si Huai was about to breathe a sigh of relief, he saw Tang Wan entering the martial arts club without looking back. Si Huai instantly understood Tang Wan's plan. Tang Wan wanted to exercise. She did not let go of her thoughts and wanted to embark on the road of no return. As for why I agreed to the Kajiga Club in the first place, it was probably because I wanted to integrate this college. Si Huai has never looked down upon these children who have not yet grown up. In his heart, these children are even more intelligent than ordinary adults. Lu Ziyi is like this, and Fu Wenzi is like this too. Similarly, the same is true for Tang Wan. That's why Tang Wan found the most acute problem in Ji Helen's matter. Extreme praise of excellence has created a distorted campus environment. Tang Wan wants to change this environment. She needs an identity. An identity with real power. Si Huai's eyes fell on Xiang Sizu, and he actually felt a little weird. Did Tang Wan really think so far ahead? Or is this just her instinct? Tang Wan cannot speak, and she will not tell anyone what she is thinking. She just walks towards her goal firmly and then completes it. When Xiang Sizu heard Fu Wenzi's words, he froze on the spot and was then escorted into the car by the police. He is not yet 14 years old, so of course he will not be criminally responsible for what he did. However, his elders will pay the price. Someone has to do something to relieve the anger of those kids who are being bullied. So, the news that Xiang Sizu dropped out of school spread all of a sudden the next day. None of them could have imagined that in just one day, the primary school department would be without a student president. Unexpectedly, in just one day, a first-grade primary school student was promoted to the position of president. Good people and good deeds need to be praised. Only with positive feedback can more and more people do good deeds. The first order issued by Tang Wan was to remove all Xiang Sizu's followers from their actual power. Then the female classmate who replaced her sister was made the president of the discipline committee. When the female classmate came to Tang Wan, she was still a little coy. The braid on her head was not tied up, just a very neat ponytail. A pair of red phoenix eyes looked very noble and indifferent, but the smile on her face suddenly weakened her alienation and made her appear a little well-behaved. It doesn't look like she is a female classmate who is determined to retaliate against others. She came to Tang Wan with great interest and did not look down upon her because Tang Wan was only 6 years old. Instead, I am very respectful. Hello, President, my name is Li Xiao, and I am the second daughter of the owner of Yunyan supermarket chain. Speaking of this, Li Xiao scratched the back of his head and looked a little embarrassed. My sister is scared. From now on, I will go to school here instead of her. I hope you won't dislike it. A blush appeared on her face and she muttered in a low voice, "My grades are not very good either." Lu Ziyi on the side snorted coldly, and there was an extra line under the school sign Deputy Director of the Learning Department, and he said abruptly, "I know that my grades are not good, so I still don't study hard." Li Xiao is not as timid as her sister. She rolled her eyes and said, "You care about me? I am good at everything except studying." But she couldn't help but keep her eyes on Tang Wan, fearing that she would dislike her for not studying well. However, Tang Wan nodded, agreed with Li Xiao's words, and wrote on his tablet. Li Xiao's aesthetics are very good, and the angle of the video was chosen very well. Also very smart. Achievements cannot represent everything. It cannot even represent a person's character. Tang Wan took out the unfinished plan of the student union, crossed out many of the suggestions above, and added a sentence at the end. Establish a new department, the consulting department. Fu Wenzi's sharp eyes saw Tang Wan's writing at a glance. But he didn't ask aloud. Instead, he took a step back and let Go 11 see the sentences on the paper at a glance. Then count silently for 3 seconds. Go 11's voice sounded, "What is the Tang Tang Consulting Department?" Tang Wan didn't notice Fu Wenzi's movements and just wrote on the tablet. "It is a place to protect some classmates. If you encounter something like senior sister Li Yao again, you can call the consultation department for help. The counseling department can also chat with people to relieve students' tension in extreme environments." Go 11 said with a look of realization on her face, "So this is actually a safe house and a psychological counseling room, right?" Tang Wan nodded and highlighted the key points of this plan. Go 11 asked again, "Then who will manage this department? It sounds like you have to communicate with people frequently and have a lot of information. It sounds like a very powerful department." Tang Wan reached out his hand, took Fu Wenzi's hand, and wrote his name on it. The soft touch stunned Fu Wenzi. Then I saw Tang Wan writing on it. Deputy Minister of Consulting Department, Fu Wenzi. Secretary General of Student Union, Fu Wenzi. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 183. Chapter 183, The New Student Union. Go 11 looked at the words written by Tang Wan and asked with some confusion, Zhi is in charge of 2 departments by 1 person. Then who is the Minister of Consultation? Tang Wan stretched out his hand and pointed at himself. Go 11 has no problem now. Originally, people like Fu Wenzi are not likely to be controlled at first glance. Other than Tang Tang, Go 11 really couldn't think of anyone else who could control Fu Wenzi. It is estimated that when those people came in front of Fu Wenzi just ignored them with a smile. Go 11 was thinking as she looked up at Fu Wenzi, who was standing next to Tang Wan. For some reason, she seemed to see the black fox tail behind Fu Wenzi, wagging happily. She shook her head vigorously to get rid of the irrelevant thoughts in her mind, and then returned to the present and looked at the officials selected by Tang Wan. Tang Wan only spent 1 day investigating clearly what the officer had done. In addition to people like Xiang Sizu who specifically seek out unmonitored places to carry out crimes, there are also many people who call their classmates out of school to bully them. Tang Wan didn't know how they could attack creatures like himself. Just looking at the injuries on the victims, his disgust for this group of people reached its peak. Most of the officers of the student union are students with good grades and good family backgrounds. They implemented Xiang Sizu's ideas, strengthened cutting-edge rights, and removed diversity, leaving only a few short labels. Tang Wan, however, did the opposite. She wants 100 flowers to bloom and all students to live well. Achievements are important, but they cannot be greater than life. While Tang Wan was writing down the name of the last officer, the large screen in the center of the students scrolled through the latest information about the primary school officers. The first one is Tang Wan. Name, Tang Wan. Class, Grade 1, A. Position, Student Council President of Primary School. Many students stopped, looked at the information above, and were secretly speechless. Then he started whispering to the people around him. First grade, damn it, what are the other senior students doing for food, are they being suppressed by a kid? I remember this Tang Wan was the kid who promoted the sales of the Pei family's tents, right? She became the president of the association as soon as she came here. Can she convince the public? I heard from my sister that the previous president was kicked out of school by her. Huh, dropping out of school, doesn't that require the consent of the 3 directors' families? Can she represent 3 families by herself? It's so hard backstage. It seems that most of the other newly appointed directors are members of the board of directors family. Is this board team building? Their results are so stable, they are basically in the top 10. How come someone else with a score ranking of 200 can also enter? Why? Tang Wan heard their discussion and didn't take it to heart at all. It was only when the consultation department appeared at the end that their discussion became louder. What does this consulting department mean? Does it want to communicate with us heart to heart? It's so funny, who would go to these kids to solve problems, ha ha ha, it made me laugh to death. What can these little doubtings do? Don't go back to the adults to solve it? I won't go anyway. I want to go to you. Who would say such private words to others? This little president takes it too much for granted. All the officers of the junior high school student union stood in the conference room, looking at the information on the screen, and felt a little silent for a moment. The young man sitting in the center put down the chess in his hand, and then said, "The young president named Tang Wan is the adopted daughter of the Lu family, and is related to the Si family. As for Fu Wenzi." His voice was gentle, like a spring breeze, with a smile. I have seen him at an international competition. As soon as these words came out, the young man standing by the window and looking out suddenly sat down next to the young man playing chess. He asked with great interest, "Is this the time the president didn't get first place?" As soon as these words came out, the conference room became even quieter. The sports minister on the side stretched out his hand to lift the young man up and muttered, "You really don't want to lift any pot." However, their president just waved his hand, his eyes narrowed into slits with a smile, and he said, "Well, that was that time. Fu Wenzi is not from Jingjiao. Maybe you are more familiar with the old families in Xiangjiang, the ones involved in the financial circle. Their traders are all world class. The whole family are arrogant gamblers." As soon as he finished speaking, Fu Wenzi's message was played on the screen. Name, Fu Wenzi. Class, Grade 4, A. Position, Secretary General of the Student Union, Deputy Director of the Consulting Department. The Junior High School Student Council President looked at the familiar face, put down the chess piece in his hand, and murmured, "How can you be willing to be played by others? Is that little president more powerful than you?" Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi didn't know that someone in the junior high school was talking about them. They applied to the school for the activity venue of the counseling department and were ready to stay there. But 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. No one came. Perhaps in the minds of those students who were bullied, the new student union is the same thing as before. They stand at the pinnacle of power and look down at other students. It's like people standing on a building with more than 100 floors. Even if they look at their kindred spirits on the ground, they will only think that those kindred spirits are just a group of ants. Their goals are so big and far-reaching that they lose sight of humanity. However, Tang Wan is very patient. She would sit in the consultation room for an hour and a half every day before going back with Fu Wenzi, Lu Ziyi, and Go 11. This more than an hour was not wasted by everyone. They were also studying and doing homework in the consultation room. In short, the tasks and duties will not be delayed. Finally, on the 10th day, the consulting room welcomed its first classmate. The light door was pushed open, and the gentle afterglow leaked from the glass window on the top. The golden sunlight falls on the soft plush carpet specially arranged by Tang Wan, and also dyes the surrounding green plants golden. There are no desks with cold light here, only wooden desks and bookcases. Even in this room, there is a gentle and intoxicating fragrance. Everything is so comfortable, cozy, and soft. However, the students who came in were particularly uneasy. His hands tightly grasped the hem of clothes in front of him, and his legs were trembling, like a frightened little quail, shivering. Go 11 on the side was about to take action, but was stopped by Tang Wan. The classmate did not speak, but just stood at the door. It seemed that whenever Tang Wan and the others were attacked, he would run out quickly. However, no one spoke. After a long time, the classmate raised his head timidly. Before his eyes, there was a small handful of scars, with a gummy lying quietly in the palm. The strong smell of corn turned into soft armor in front of his eyes, as if wrapping his uneasiness. Tang Wan opened his mouth and uttered a sentence from his throat. Ah! Eating sweets. Thanks Jinziwan Z's Habayazai for the reward, I love you so much. Thanks to Tang Tang, today is also the day when I want to be the king of the sea, Yan Le, that meow looking at the moon, Pegasus and the starry sky, 10, and Susuayuki are the 7 treasures for their monthly votes. I would like to give everyone a big heart. In the new January, everyone should be happy every day. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 184. Chapter 184. Are you here to embarrass us? The classmate looked dull. If the school badge on his chest was not on a black background, he would have looked more convincing. He subconsciously took the candy corn from Tang Wan's hand and whispered, "Thank you." Then he looked at the classmates present with some uneasiness, feeling that he was so weak and could easily be bullied by them. But those classmates who looked fierce did not come to him. The only one in front of him was Tang Wan, the young and weak president. Of course, if this classmate had seen Tang Wan confront lawbreakers alone, he might not be so relieved. After all, Tang Wan's calmness drove people crazy. Tang Wan himself didn't feel there was any problem. Instead, he felt that the lawbreaker was not firm enough. The little classmate in front of me saw that no one was paying attention to him, so he finally had the courage to walk to the seat next to him. Tang Wan sat opposite him and took out a piece of paper. The surrounding area became quiet. The warm environment made the classmate slowly lower his guard. The classmate's name is Yin Hungrui. He is a third-year primary school student and one of the top 10 students in the 3rd grade. But he is a child who can only read and cannot get along with others. He also stutters when speaking and cannot express himself clearly. That is to say, the current language test in the primary school does not require oral English, otherwise his oral English score will be delayed. He knows Tang Wan. This first-year president cannot speak, so she will not force herself to speak like others. Tang Wan is very patient. Even if Yin Hungrui speaks slowly and stumbles, her expression is serious. I am, in the class, people, popularity, no, not good. I know, say, they, laugh at me. Actually, I don't really care, I don't care, it's just. Yin Hungrui's eyes turned red when he said this. He can only read. Only the results are acceptable. He usually does not fight, and does not bully those students who do not have good grades like those students who have good grades. He is honest and does not bully anyone, but they can't stand him. I didn't bully them, but why did they bully me? He burst into tears. Tang Wan knows, and Yin Hongruyi knows the answer. Under wolf education, these good intentions seem out of place. In a dark world, the only light is sin. At this point, Yin Hongruyi sobbed a little, and he said to himself, I went home, sued, and told my parents, but they said, why, other, he has good grades and no classmates who are good, being bullied. Why do they bully me? Tang Wan lowered his head silently, writing and drawing on a piece of white paper. Just when you raise your arms, there is only one sentence above. Have you finished your homework today? Are you in a hurry to get home now? Yin Hongruyi looked at the question on the white paper, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and replied in a low voice, yes. Just when he didn't know why Tang Wan asked such a question, he wrote on the piece of paper again. Are you interested in joining the study department? You will be able to use your strengths and reduce the time spent with classmates. Yin Hongruyi raised his head and looked at Tang Wan's beautiful eyes, looking a little dazed. Like a dull little duck, with red eyes, pitifully like a drowned puppy. Tang Wan couldn't help it, and stretched out his hand, trying to wipe away his tears with a tissue. But Tang Wan had just finished halfway. Go 11, who was sitting behind her, immediately came to Tang Wan's side. Then he grabbed Tang Wan's wrist and shook his head. Sometimes in school, it is a bad thing to help others too much. This will make the person being helped appear extra weak and weak, which means that everyone can bully them. Tang Wan immediately thought of this aspect, but she did not take back her hand. For nothing else. I just feel like, when will good intentions be used as weapons and become a way to hurt others? This is actually a bit ridiculous. The soft tissue fell on the corner of Yin Hongruyi's eyes. He glanced at Tang Wan, and then lowered his head as if he was embarrassed. After all, it was a bit embarrassing to be comforted by a child who was 2 or 3 years younger than me. But more importantly, he was helpless about Tang Wan's actions. The little president is really a very gentle classmate, and he feels out of place in this college. But she did live here and became one of the symbols of power here. Yin Hongruyi kept in mind what Tang Wan said. It was the first time I returned home with a relaxed and somewhat expectant mood. Looking at his father sitting on the sofa with an unhappy expression, Yin Hongruyi actually didn't feel much sadness in his heart. His ears heard his father's words again, telling him to swallow his anger, not to be unconventional, and to integrate himself into the group. I felt very calm in my heart. In the eyes of the young president, it is a very bad thing for him to be bullied, and the young president will find ways to help him solve it. As his own father, not only did he not take it into consideration, but he also felt that it was his fault for being too cowardly. Yin Hongruyi now just turned a deaf ear to what his father said and just listened. He is waiting for Tang Wan to bring him a different student life tomorrow. Finally, it's the next day. Yin Hongruyi walked to school with a different mood, but the first time he entered the classroom, he saw the president. The little president is always taciturn. She can't speak, and she doesn't seem to like talking very much. She just stands on the podium and looks calmly at the classmates sitting in the classroom. Watching them whisper under his gaze, watching them look uneasy. Yin Hongruyi suddenly felt happy in his heart. It turns out that it is really useful. It turns out that there are really people who are willing to change the sick world. Tang Wan took out the test papers from the Student Union Study Department and distributed them. Then right on the blackboard. The Learning Department is recruiting new students, please actively sign up to participate. However, the faces of the students sitting in the classroom turned ugly. They didn't join the study department because they didn't want to. It is clear that they cannot reach the threshold of the study department at all. The entrance examination questions of the study department are very difficult. There are only 2 or 3 students in this class who can get a passing grade. Now that Tang Wan took out such a test paper and put it in front of them, it was obviously to embarrass them. When they realized this, all the students looked unhappy, especially those students who went to the study department but were persuaded to leave. Their voices couldn't help but get louder. "President, what do you mean? Are you here to embarrass us? The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head?" Chapter 185. Chapter 185. She is the rule. Tang Wan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he heard this classmate's voice, turned around and looked directly at him. Those dark eyes usually looked straight into people's hearts and could see through everyone's disguises. They looked the same now, which made the classmate feel a little scared. "There is no place to hide any thoughts in my heart, it is so obvious in front of Tang Wan." After he finished saying this, he realized that the person standing in front of him was not a nerd who could be bullied, but the young president who had just taken office. Even though she is only a first-year student, she is so outstanding and highly regarded by the school. The words he said were completely provocative. "Will be criticized." However, Tang Wan did not write anything on the blackboard to retaliate against him, he just wrote on the blackboard, "No, I just want you to recognize the excellence of others." As soon as I wrote this sentence, all the students looked unhappy. Because in this sentence, Tang Wan obviously regards this nerd as an excellent person, while they are just mediocre. Who can bear this? The nerds in the class are usually bullied by them. Thinking of this, they became quiet. Just holding a breath in my heart, I want to answer the questions in this test paper. But the more they did it, the more they felt panicked, because many of the questions in this test paper were beyond their knowledge. The nerd who was bullied by them was standing behind Tang Wan honestly, like her little follower, and he seemed to have found a backer. There was actually some bright color in his eyes, not as dull as usual. This realization made the people doing the questions below even more angry. They moved faster and faster, but all the big questions only had one solution written on them, but there were no answers or steps. Finally, half an hour was up. Tang Wan walked up to them one by one and looked at their answers. He shook his head as he walked, as if he was dissatisfied with them. As for the teacher who was supposed to be in this class, he stood at the door after listening to Tang Wan's words, and felt a little strange as he watched Tang Wan deal with these disobedient young masters and ladies. Logically speaking, those students who are bullied should not be well received by the student union. After all, in the education of this school, all people should live like wolves. If someone bullies you, you will definitely repay him 10 times or 100 times. There will never be such terms as protection and shelter. But now Tang Wan seems to have opened up a new path. She has begun to actively tolerate those classmates who are not strong. "It seems that I want to give these weak people a protective umbrella and let them spend their short study life in this school safely." Teachers don't know whether this change is good or bad, but everything Tang Wan is doing now is obviously contrary to the principal's teaching philosophy. However, the teacher did not interrupt Tang Wan. After all, he is just a teacher in this school. If possible, of course he would like all his students to coexist peacefully, but it is obvious that such a simple request is particularly difficult in this school. This situation is caused by the connivance of adults. The teacher looked at Tang Wan's little figure, and suddenly a little expectation rose in his heart, hoping that she would inject different vitality into this quagmire-like college. But when his eyes fell on Tang Wan's face, he smiled mockingly to himself. What can a 6-year-old child do that what adults like them cannot do? A person's energy and ability are limited. Even if she can save the victims in this class, can she still save the victims in the entire school? Tang Wan didn't know that the teacher standing behind him had so many thoughts in his mind. She just followed her own steps and strived to do her best in everything step by step. Tang Wan walked back to the podium again and wrote on it. Obviously, apart from Yin Hungrui, there is only one classmate among you who is qualified. An ordinary sentence made many students break their guard. Children of their age, the most unpleasant thing to hear is "who are you inferior to?" Moreover, the person they are inferior to is the person they have always looked down on and bullied. This insulting nature has simply multiplied. The classmate who was arguing with Tang Wan just now stood up and said to Tang Wan, "So what? This is all he knows." Tang Wan nodded and wrote on the blackboard. "Not very good, but that's all you can do here. You." The male classmate's hands were clenched into fists, and veins popped out on his forehead. Fortunately, he was not dominated by anger yet. He used his remaining rationality to restrain his movements and did not swing out the fist in his hand. Yin Honggrui was so frightened that he shrank directly behind Tang Wan. He was so frightened that he was often bullied by this fist in class. Tang Wan made no evasive movements at all. She stood straight in front of Yin Honggrui, making a protective gesture. But she was obviously small and thin, but her momentum overwhelmed the strong-looking male classmate at this moment. The classroom was silent for a moment. Tang Wan took a deep breath, turned around and wrote on the blackboard. "There are many kinds of cowardice and incompetence in the world. The most despised thing is using one's physical strength to threaten others with violence. Only weak people will wave their fists at the weak. Strong people never complain about the environment, while weak people feel sorry for themselves." Tang Wan's handwriting is very beautiful. The character is reflected vividly in her body, but Tang Wan's handwriting is not as thin as her body, but each stroke, horizontal and vertical, is sharp. It's just a little rounded when turning corners, as if tolerating others. These words will not be spoken to them by teachers and elders in this school. They just need to make themselves stronger, sharper, and crueler, which is to grow. As for protection, that is simply a fantasy. Tang Wan knew that these classmates had an almost innocent cruelty. They still believe in the system and management. They all want to be managers. They are the most loyal followers of this pyramid system. So Tang Wan clearly knew that if she wanted to change the situation, she had to become the one in power. She cannot be a champion of the system. She cannot become a person governed by the system. She wants to be the one who makes the rules. She wants her classmates in this school to see her and know that she is the standard. She will be the best controller in this school. If the rules here are wrong from the beginning, then Tang Wan will be the one to break the rules. From the day Tang Wan took office, she was the rule itself. Thanks Jin Z Wan ZZ Baizai for the reward. Good night everyone, I love you so much. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 186. Chapter 186. If you want to get on the chessboard, you must first take out your chips. Class 3A was unusually quiet, with almost no one taking the initiative to speak. The classroom was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop, and the atmosphere was a bit strange. People are different. In basic education, most people can reach the average level as long as they work hard enough. But higher ones require talent. Many people never reach that threshold throughout their lives. Tang Wan didn't know that she looked like she was shining in the eyes of others. It's so bright. Some people are born to be the focus of others' attention. Tang Wan looked at them without saying a word, put Yin Hongrui's excellent test paper on the table, and then projected it on the blackboard. The entrance examination for the study department can be taken by students from the entire primary school, so there is no reason why the difficulty of the examination will be reduced because of the lower grade. The entire examination paper is randomized by the system, so there is no possibility of leaking the questions. According to the school's education method, the value of everyone exists based on assessment again and again. By this time Tang Wan was writing on the blackboard. The expressions on the faces of the students in the classroom were extremely ugly. However, Tang Wan still wrote the fourth sentence. But I don't think this is the only criterion for measuring personal value. As soon as the sentence was written, almost all the students' eyes fell on Tang Wan, including the teacher standing at the door. His eyes were filled with surprise and some disbelief. This is just a 6-year-old child, her language logic and behavioral logic are far beyond those of her peers. Now even her vision and mind are broader than those children. But does such a child really exist? Are you really not dreaming? Tang Wan continued to write. Isn't it because you bully Yin Hongruyi because he is unwilling to use the rights given to him by the school? I think to some extent, you are probably not a supporter of this rule. But you must have some advantages to make your value greater than a single achievement. Writing this, Tang Wan stopped her movements. She put down the chalk and stood on the podium, looking at the classmate who was the first to take the lead in talking to her, with a scrutinizing look in her eyes. She obviously couldn't speak, but she spoke in a deafening voice. Since you are unwilling to support such rules, you must have the power to resist. You must have corresponding chips to have a chance to stand on the chessboard. As the backbone of the third grade, A, class and the last one in the class, the broken hair on his head covered his forehead and his ambitious eyes. Finally, he walked up to Yin Hongruyi, slowly lowered his head, and said to Yin Hongruyi for the first time, "I'm sorry." Although other students in the class didn't understand why Wei Ye did this, they also stood up and apologized to Yin Hongruyi one by one. Whether he was sincere or not, at least on the surface, Tang Wan won the battle. This is a collaboration hidden under the superficial color of apology. It's not just the backbone of the elementary school student union who are anti-emotional. Wei Ye looked at Tang Wan's back and couldn't help but yelled at her, "Don't lie to me," or... He hesitated to speak, but thought of the powerful young president who had just stood on the podium, so he suppressed the last words. A person with such clean eyes probably cannot lie. The teacher who finished watching this assessment finally walked into the classroom. He took out the lesson plan, looked at the students in the classroom, and then turned to read the words on the blackboard. Then he shook his head slowly. "If I were as old as them, I would probably have to be dragged away, right? In this negotiation, there are no losers, only big winners." From that day on, everyone found that the atmosphere in Class 3A was getting better and better, and even those students with poor grades did not make any noise in class. Not only that, their classmates are also the class that has initiated the most assessments to the student union. Nearly all students want to join the student union. Like being possessed. Yin Hongruyi has been living in a fog during this period. In the past, those classmates who bullied themselves took the test paper to ask themselves, and wanted to know the solution of these exercises. He is not a grudge-bearing person, so he treats all his classmates equally and explains the fa to them patiently. The last classmate is Wei Ye. It seemed like this was the first time he came to ask someone about study-related questions. The whole person was so stiff that he couldn't stand it. However, Yin Hongruyi is a stubborn guy. When he does things, he does not care about who is in front of him. So he was very serious. Until the classmate in front of me said, "Thank you." Only then did Yin Hongruyi realize who the person standing in front of him was. His face suddenly turned pale, and he fell directly behind him in fear. In the end, it was Wei Ye who caught him quickly with quick eyes and hands, preventing him from falling off the stool. It's just that Wei Ye's movements were too exaggerated, which made Yin Hongruyi even more frightened. However, he waited for a long time and only waited for Wei Ye to say thank you and a bottle of soda on the table. That's Wei Ye's favorite drink. Yin Hongruyi stared blankly at Wei Ye's figure walking further and further away, swallowed all the sounds, and then pushed the drink away. Although he is slow, he also knows that the damage has been done, and even if he makes up for it now, there will still be an ugly scar. With the positive example of Yin Hongruyi, the number of people in the consulting room gradually increased. Tang Wan is getting busier and busier, but the atmosphere in the primary school is getting better and better. But the strangeness in the elementary school has not yet been noticed by the seniors in the junior high school and high school. Until this semester's student union exchange meeting was about to begin, Tang Wan looked at the work report he had compiled and suddenly felt that his trip was not worthwhile. As the Secretary General of the student union, Fu Wenzi will of course go to the high school with Tang Wan. Other officers have to maintain the daily routine of the primary school and cannot leave. With more and more people in the consulting room, Tang Wan also renovated the consulting room and installed a lot of seats in it. It can also be used as a study room and library. While sitting on the school bus, Tang Wan kept his head down and dealt with things. After finishing the matter, when I was about to take out my homework to write, I was held down by a pair of hands. Tang Wan didn't even need to turn around to know who the person who did this was. She pursed her lips and stretched out her hand to break open Fu Wenzi's knuckled hand. However, a sigh came from the top of her head, and then Fu Wenzi closed the book with irresistible force. Writing homework in the car is not good for your eyes. Tang Wan is very pressed for time. She is desperately squeezing her energy, wishing she could split one day into 2 days and want to grow up quickly. However, I forgot that she is just a little kid now, only 6 years old. She shouldn't have to work so hard. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 187. Chapter 187, The Snowy Mountains of Nepal. Fu Wenzi looked at Tang Wan's helpless look, stretched out his hand, and helped her make a decision. He directly carried Tang Wan's small schoolbag over, packed all the documents, and only gave Tang Wan a fluffy pillow to sleep on. Tang Wan was a little unhappy, but she knew that Fu Wenzi would not harm her, but was just sulking to himself. His cheeks were so angry that they swelled up, like a little bun. It's a bit childish. The pillow was made by Grandma Si. Put some hay inside to help you sleep. But Grandma Si was afraid that Tang Wan would not need it, so she gave this task to Fu Wenzi. Fu Wenzi readily accepted this task and completed it well. Soon, the school bus arrived at the high school. The teaching building here is much higher than that of the primary school, and it is also larger than the primary school. There were also many international exchange students here. They saw the two little doubtings getting off the school bus and looked at them with some curiosity. The president of the high school student union did not expect that the elementary school would be so messy, so he replaced the 6th grader with a 1st grader. When he thought of this, the high school president's face became a little ugly. Although he had kept a straight face for many years, no more emotions could be seen on his face. The exchange student standing next to him spoke fluent Mandarin and looked at Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi with surprise in his eyes. My friends, these two little friends are so good looking. You know, in my eyes you all look similar, but these two kids really won't blind me. The high school president followed his gaze and then focused on Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi. He nodded in his mind. These two are indeed much better than he imagined. Even the younger one doesn't seem to be the kind of kid who can't communicate. He seems to be able to communicate. Not a very stupid person. It's just that she is a high school student after all, and she won't habitually judge people by their appearance like they did in elementary school. After hesitating for at least a minute, the high school president walked up to Tang Wan and said coldly to her, "Are you the president of the primary school? Follow me." According to his movements, he even looked impatient. The foreign friends beside the president hurriedly came to Tang Wan's side, with bright and open smiles on their faces, and their golden hair seemed to glow in the sunlight. When he speaks, he also has a sense of familiarity. Oh, don't be afraid, Xiao Heking doesn't mean any harm, he's just pretending to be weird. You have to tighten yourself up to look like a mature president. The classmate shook his head as he spoke, expressing his disapproval of Xiao Heking's behavior, but Tang Wan heard it. His words were defending his friends. Just trying to excuse Xiao Hecking. Tang Wan raised a smile and nodded. The expression on Fu Wenzi's face did not change at the side, and his smile was very polite and gentle. It seemed that the two children were both very gentle and generous people. The high school president who was walking in front of them snorted coldly, and at a glance he saw that his friend had fallen into the trap of beauty again. But he didn't want to save people. Compared to the junior high school, which already has a certain social awareness, the primary school is actually the most difficult to manage. Everyone is self-centered, and school rules are not so binding on them. But this president was able to suppress all the objections from the primary school section in a very short period of time and let them listen to what he had to say. This was an extremely incredible thing. Let alone the Secretary General standing next to Tang Wan. Compared to the group of ungrown wolves in the elementary school, the middle school and high school students were more familiar with Fu Wenzi's name. He is a true genius. It is a special talent. He can be seen in every competition. As long as he is in the competition, almost no one can take the first place from him. He always looks so at ease, making it difficult for people to figure out his true identity. But such a monster stood behind Tang Wan obediently. What a terrifying phenomenon. It's simply unbelievable. Just when Xiao Hecking was thinking this, Fu Wenzi slowly raised his head, staring at him with those deep eyes, which made Xiao Hecking a little creepy. He immediately remembered the time when he faced Fu Wenzi last year. Fu Wenzi was only 7 or 8 years old. He held a modified sniper rifle in his hand and shot all the contestants indiscriminately. He was the last to confront Fu Wenzi. In that forest, Xiao Hecking could not find Fu Wenzi at all, but Fu Wenzi seemed to have opened his eyes. No matter where everyone was hiding, they could not avoid his headshot. Only Xiao Hecking saw Fu Wenzi's eyes at the last second when he was eliminated. That is an expression that does not put anyone in the eyes. In his eyes, people and life do not seem to have temperature, but are just a series of meaningless data. His shooting hand did not shake, and he even scored full marks in the post-game psychological test. Everyone said that Fu Wenzi was a genius and thought he was calm. Looking at his smiling face, I felt that he was gentle. However, Xiao Hecking, who had seen those eyes, would never agree with this sentence. Xiao Hecking even had a bold guess. He felt that Fu Wenzi actually memorized the answers to the psychological test. Fu Wenzi probably doesn't agree with the rules of human society and just follows them numbly. The gentleness in him is a disguise, and his underlying tone is coldness and inhumanity. But now, Xiao Hecking actually saw the almost real tenderness in Fu Wenzi. Xiao Hecking quickly withdrew his gaze, then grabbed Ninal, who was still trying to communicate with Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi, and dragged him away. As soon as Ninal was dragged by the collar, he struggled and said to Tang Wan without giving up, "Sweetheart, you can go to Nepal with me. I will take you to play. The scenery there is so beautiful. Do you like snow? The snow scene over there is beautiful." Ninal is very enthusiastic, and all the high school students are used to it. On the contrary, Tang Wan was a little embarrassed. Although she has many enthusiastic friends around her, it is still rare to find someone as familiar as Ninal. Suddenly, Fu Wenzi, who was standing next to Tang Wan, said something, interrupting Tang Wan's thoughts. "Don't go there, it's too cold. It's too cold and your body can't stand it." Although Fu Wenzi did not say the latter sentence, his eyes looked at Tang Wan, making Tang Wan understand what he meant at once. Tang Wan just withdrew his gaze without a clear attitude. She had to measure the land within a limited time. It may not necessarily be the snow-capped mountains of Nepal, but it must be the great rivers and mountains of the motherland. Her health will be fine. She will have to spend many winters before she can grow into an adult. Only then can Tang Wan achieve his goal. Fu Wenzi looked at Tang Wan's back and twitched the corner of his mouth. Then he followed. "Thanks to Qian, Buji, Xiao, Qian and Mao Tuanzi for their monthly votes. I love you. I went to burn paper today. The update is late. I'm sorry. I love you all. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 188. Chapter 188 We are all the same. When Tang Wan was sitting in the high school student union conference room, he realized that the school's care for students is reflected in all aspects. Of course, this school is really good as long as you don't mention their twisted and single selection rules. Tang Wan is not a person who likes to be deprived of information. When she was in the orphanage, she would seize the opportunities around her and collect the most information in a limited environment. Now in Jingqiao, there are so many channels for receiving information, and Tang Wan is certainly not able to let go of this opportunity. She learned about many schools and read reports about those schools. She also knew that the school she was attending now was actually very difficult for ordinary people to enter. Not everyone has the opportunity to study in a school where students have a high degree of freedom. Tang Wan cherishes this opportunity very much. Tang Wan slowly raised his head and looked at the desks, chairs, and benches that were much higher than those in the primary school. He knew that the desks, chairs, and benches in the primary school had actually been changed according to the needs of the students. The Secretary General of the high school on the side walked behind Tang Wan and took the initiative to press the button behind Tang Wan's stool. A blue light appeared on the handle, scanning the size of Tang Wan's finger, and automatically adjusted the bench. The person sitting next to the president of the high school smiled like a vixen. Looking at Tang Wan's silent expression, he thought he had frightened the child, so he explained in a gentle voice, "It's a chair with a scanning system. It hasn't been launched yet, so it's normal that you're not used to it. The main reason is that there are many people coming to this conference room, and everyone's height and age are quite different, so this kind of chair will be more practical. Don't worry, the safety factor is very high." Tang Wan understood the comfort behind his words and nodded. "Looks a little cold." Such an attitude surprised the fox-like vice president. No one had ever been so disrespectful to him. This kid is a bit aloof. None of them opened their mouths to speak. No one would make a big deal about the fact that Tang Wan cannot speak. After all, compared with these shortcomings, Tang Wan's shining points are not so easy to cover up. At this moment, the president of the junior high school started to speak. Tang Wan's eyes also fell on him. After all, watching others talk is the most basic courtesy. The gaze of the junior high school president always fell on Tang Wan's side vaguely, and it seemed that he and Fu Wenzi were old acquaintances. Tang Wan turned to look at Fu Wenzi curiously, but Fu Wenzi just smiled, and then asked in a low voice, "What's wrong?" His voice was so low that only Tang Wan sitting next to him could hear it. It's just that the student union officials present listened very carefully, so Tang Wan and Fu Wenzi acted like two little hamsters, muttering in private. The vice president of the high school reached out and poked Xiao Heking next to him, and said in the same low voice as Fu Wenzi, "Is that little doubting the little devil we met during the competition?" Xiao Heking nodded without changing his expression. He knew that he could not be the only one to recognize Fu Wenzi. Fu Wenzi is so recognizable that as long as he stays around for a while, everyone will know him soon. Sure enough, Xiao Heking heard his hairy boy taking a breath of cold air next to him. Just said, "Why is that little president so scary? Can you subdue that little devil?" Xiao Heking felt like she had a headache. He reached out his hand and rubbed his head. "I don't want to talk to this person whose IQ suddenly dropped." Suddenly, the president of the junior high school said in the direction of Fu Wenzi, "Is there anything wrong with what I said? Why isn't Mr. Fu not happy to listen?" Tang Wan stiffened when he heard the voice of the president of the junior high school. He straightened up slowly like a puppet. This is the first time Tang Wan has been caught deserting, and he is really embarrassed. Her ears suddenly turned red. From Fu Wenzi's perspective, you can see the red tips of the ears, which look particularly cute. Fu Wenzi thought Tang Wan could tease her a little to make her happy. But seeing Tang Wan looking so uneasy and embarrassed, his heart suddenly beat faster. Fu Wenzi has always known that Tang Wan is cute. Children have not yet learned how to pretend to be adults, so they always have a better impression of Tang Wan, who is cute. Fu Wenzi is no exception. He responded to the question just asked by the president of the junior high school, "No problem." As soon as he finished speaking, the president of the junior high school nodded clearly. The smile on his face was very gentle. Even his voice was as warm as the spring breeze, but the words he spoke were a bit sharp. "I thought you were not interested in this topic of ours, so you were whispering there." Tang Wan frowned slightly when he heard this. The red color on her ears has faded, and her face has returned to its usual expression. Before Tang Wan could write out what he wanted to say, Fu Wenzi on the side had stretched out his hand to hold down Tang Wan's tablet and said, "Of course not, it's just because our president is here for the first time and is a little timid." "Tang Wan?" Tang Wan heard Fu Wenzi's words and raised his head suddenly, and saw Fu Wenzi talking nonsense. But Tang Wan also knows that there is no good solution now, better than what Fu Wenzi said. So she just nodded in agreement. At this moment, the vice president who had been sitting next to the high school president suddenly said, "Speaking of which, we haven't heard the voice of the president of the elementary school student union. Come up here and introduce yourself." Hearing this, Tang Wan stood up without any stage fright, turned on the voice player on the tablet, and read out the text inside. "Hello fellow seniors, my name is Tang Wan, and I am currently serving as the president of the student union of the primary school of Lingyun College. I hope that I can shine in my position in the coming days. Be a qualified student union president." Tang Wan's words were very official and formal, which made these student union members who were used to the privileged class feel a little uncomfortable. After all, no one thought about doing this position well. They just thought about how to maximize their power to achieve what they wanted to accomplish. It was a bit uncomfortable to suddenly have a classmate whose ideas were contrary to one's own, but they didn't show such thoughts on their faces. Instead, he nodded sanctimoniously, seeming to agree with what Tang Wan said. It was those officers who had not yet learned how to act, looking at Tang Wan with those strange eyes, inwardly laughing at Tang Wan's naivete. Only those who have never enjoyed the sense of superiority brought by power would say something like this. When the young president sits in this position for a long time, he will naturally become like them. Similarly, look down on those who cannot be reused. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 189. Chapter 189 Fighting for the Right to Freedom. They did not take Tang Wan's innocent words to heart, and seeing Tang Wan behave like this, they also knew that she was not good at talking. There is inevitably a bit of contempt in his eyes. Tang Wan did not miss these sights, and similarly, Fu Wenzi did not miss them either. The president of the junior high school saw Tang Wan's actions, and then he had a somewhat embarrassed look on his face, and he was also a little annoyed. His voice is still gentle, and people can't bear to blame him. "I'm really sorry, I don't know the president of the primary school, I can't speak this." He seemed to be thinking about his words, but after thinking for a long time, he couldn't find a good way to say it. He could only look at Tang Wan with an apologetic expression, hoping that she could forgive him. Tang Wan is not a person who sticks to something, so he quickly nodded and dismissed the matter. Fu Wenzi just took a look at the gentle-looking president and found this person in his memory. Speaking of which, Fu Wenzi has actually met most of the people in this conference room. But no one said anything. The meeting continues. The president of the junior high school clicked on the tablet in his hand to display the content of the meeting on the big screen. For this sports meeting, the school's funds have increased by 10% compared with previous years. Compared with last year's projects, equestrian, hockey, and martial arts have been added this time. In addition, the national team will also select relevant athletes. I don't know if it needs to be reported. The contestants in the junior high school may be a little too old. I prefer to choose from the elementary school. Tang Wan listened attentively, and suddenly heard the president of the junior high school making a slight pause in the movements of his hands. I don't know why, but Tang Wan always felt that the president was pointing at him. From all aspects. But it was obviously the first time that he and I had met. Tang Wan didn't know where such hostility came from, but she wasn't afraid. Tang Wan connected his tablet to the screen, and then typed what he wanted to say on it, making sure that everyone in the conference room could see his words. It says, "I disagree." These four concise words blocked all the words that the junior high school president was going to say next. At the end of the day, no one who can sit at the table would reject companions so bluntly. They are members of a community of interests and generally won't quarrel with each other. Furthermore, generally speaking, the president of the elementary school has the least real power and is also the easiest to fool. The previous president may have been arrogant in the elementary school, but in this conference room, he was the bottom of the food chain. Is passive. But the little classmate named Tang Wan seems not so easy to fool. And it is an unexpected strength. The president of the junior high school has not forgotten his character. He nodded generously and pretended to be listening, but he said, "Why did Tang Wan refuse? Is there something wrong with what I said? In the past, athletes were selected from the primary school and sent to the national team. Everyone liked the result. The implication is that Tang Wan is breaking the rules and that Tang Wan is a troublemaker." Xiao Heking frowned without a trace after listening to Ji Hyukxiao's words. No matter how many times he spent time with Ji Hyukxiao, he still disliked Ji Hyukxiao. It's too sinister. However, Tang Wan seemed to have not understood what he meant and continued to type. "I think the number of athletes should be distributed proportionally. I don't think the seniors in the junior high school are qualified to decide the choice of the students in the primary school." Tang Wan's words were so rude that Ji Hyukxiao couldn't help but smile. But he just smiled, and then said politely, "You have just entered the first grade, of course you don't know our rules." You. However, before he could finish his words, the information collected by Tang Wan was displayed on the screen, which made him shut up. Tang Wan never fights an unprepared battle. Those and things that can make Tang Wan be more vigilant and allow her to analyze human nature are all her enemies. It is an unsafe factor. Before coming to the meeting, many students from 3rd grade and above came to the consultation room and talked about the sports meets in previous years. Unlike other primary schools that look forward to sports meets, Lingyuan College's primary school does not look forward to sports meets, and even resists them. In their minds, this sports meeting is like calling someone to die. The junior high school is between the primary school and the high school. Every time, the primary school is suppressed and the primary school is left to run errands and do hard work. Even the quota for the national team is the highest. Logically speaking, how many students studying in this school are willing to join the national team? They have countless choices in life, and there is not only one way out. So before coming here, Tang Wan had counted the students who were willing to join the national team. What a coincidence, the number is exactly the proportion of the primary school department. 12%. Ji Hyukxiao looked at the information on the screen, curled up his fingers slightly, and said nothing. On the contrary, the steward next to him was a little nervous and asked in a low voice, "What should I do, President?" Not many people in the junior high school are willing to go. That's right. There are not many people in the junior high school who are willing to join the national team. Unlike the high school students who plan for themselves, and unlike the elementary school students who are easy to fool around, most of the junior high school students are ambitious students. They are also students who would almost never choose to ask for trouble and go to the national team. Looking at the number of people above, Ji Hyuk-seao suddenly said, "As the president, can't we decide whether they will go or not? You can't be too spoiled by these classmates." Tangwon raised his eyes, and those black eyes met his. Those eyes as bright as black grapes seemed to see through the soul, making Ji Hyuk-seao's hands and feet feel cold and unable to move. Under her gaze, Ji Hyuk-seao seemed to see his own dirty soul hidden under the skin. It gave him some palpitations. Tangwon heard Ji Hyuk-seao's contempt for other students in his tone. In his mind, the classmates in the elementary school seemed not to be human beings, but just chess pieces without ideas of their own. They need to be arranged into various shapes suitable for completing the task according to the needs of the guild president. Tangwon doesn't like it. She pursed her lips, raised her pale hand, and wrote on the tablet. "I reject. They are living people, not chess pieces to be manipulated. They have their own ideas and things they like and don't like to do. Neither I, nor you, nor anyone else is qualified to make decisions for them. All people are free. Please put away your condescending attitude, otherwise I will send this recording to the board of directors. Please respect every student." Fu Wenzi seemed to only have eyes for Tangwon, who was striving for his classmates. She was in this huge and luxurious cage conference room, with those seemingly arrogant predators, for some herbivorous creatures. The right to fight for freedom. Thanks to SH Bookworm, Jukui, and Ching Ran for your monthly votes. I love you all. Suddenly thought of a small theater, ha 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 ha. G Fox, I hope you and the little devil will not listen to me like you did just now, otherwise you will attack me when I speak. Tang Tang, with a look of disapproval, the cat ears on her head trembling with anger. I think you are a police officer in the Pacific, you should be lenient. Zhizzy, while stroking Tangwon's cat ears soothingly, he looked at Jihu fiercely. Shark, I've cut you into red bean paste. Has nothing to do with the text. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 190. Chapter 190 88%. The meaning expressed by Tangwon is actually somewhat inappropriate here. After all, most of the students who can sit here for meetings are not soft-hearted people. What they learned was to use all the resources available to them. In their position, the most important thing is to develop everything the family owns in the best interests. As for humanistic feelings, that kind of naive thing is something they don't need. Tangwon did not miss their glances. The corners of her mouth drooped slightly, looking a little disappointed, but this emotion only flashed by and disappeared quickly. When she came here from Tangwon, she knew that the implementation of her idea would not go smoothly. Most people are amiable when they do not harm their own interests. But it is obvious that what he is doing now is to threaten their interests, so it seems a bit unhuman. This is human nature, Tangwon understands it, but will not back down. The junior high school president looked at the message written by Tangwon and couldn't help laughing. As his laughter rang out, other student union officers also laughed. The officers in the high school department are okay, not as presumptuous as the officers in the junior high school student union. After all, none of their presidents smiled. If they did, wouldn't it seem a bit overstepping their bounds? Although they have not yet entered society, they are all good people and will never leave any clues for themselves. At this moment, Ji Hyuk-seao suddenly said, "Classmate Tangwon is really a little naive. He thought everyone was fighting for freedom that is not worth a lot of money." Speaking of this, the vice president next to him also laughed, and his tone was a bit incredulous. "We have enjoyed the convenience brought by so many families, so why should we pay a little for our families? It's just a little freedom, why not help the family move to a higher level?" They thought that after they said this, the young-looking president would retreat, but unexpectedly, Tang Wan continued to enter a paragraph. So, what you are saying is that if they go to the national team, will you provide them with corresponding remuneration? Tang Wan was not offended by their bad attitude. Instead, he asked them questions in an extremely calm manner, seemingly at ease. The director of the high school department was slightly startled. Very few children can remain calm in the face of such bad emotions. The little president in front of him looks very mature. At least communication is much easier than they thought. Niner, who was sitting next to Xiao Heking, stretched out his hand, poked Xiao Heking's side, and asked in a low voice, "Are your children here so young that you can use data to support discussions with others?" Really? There's something. Having said this, Ninel paused for a moment, then sighed and said in an exaggerated tone, "No wonder I can't defeat you every time. Is it because of this?" Xiao Heking was silent for a moment and did not speak. After a while, he nodded, with a serious look on his face, and it seemed that he really meant what Zaninir said. Only the vice president of the student union around him knows how there are so many geniuses in the world. Other than Tang Wan, who was standing in front of them and discussing with the president of the junior high school, the only one beside him was Fu Wenzi, a rare genius in this world. Otherwise, why would the junior high school president, who was a few years older than them, retreat steadily during Tang Wan's discussion and could only use his elder status to suppress Tang Wan? Ji Hyuxiao's face turned gloomy for a moment as he looked at Tang Wan's typed words, but soon he returned to his usual gentle smile. He didn't know if Tang Wan did it on purpose, but the use of family power was actually a lightning point for him. Ji family has a main family and branch families. The family where Ji Hyuxiao belongs is a branch of the Ji family. The heir of the Ji family is still in elementary school. Even though he is now over 10 years old, he still does not have access to the central rights of the Ji family. But the child of this family can do it. Thinking of this, Ji Hyuxiao pursed her lips, her tone was no longer as calm as before, and even had some unhidden breath. The first sentence was, "Tang Wan, are you kidding? We are just children, how can we have the right to decide such a big matter? But bringing glory to the country is something that every citizen should do." Tang Wan thought for a while, then nodded and wrote on the tablet again. "Every citizen should do well, so we have provided a list of volunteers to participate in the national team. Now it is your turn, seniors. As seniors who are several years older than us, shouldn't the seniors set an example?" Tang Wan's handwriting is very beautiful, and his words are also very clear when written. Fu Wenzi sat behind Tang Wan, as if cheering Tang Wan up. There were many appraising eyes around Fu Wenzi, as if they were trying to get Fu Wenzi to speak. They were a little surprised, why could Fu Wenzi give such an important matter to this mute? Moreover, the way Fu Wenzi looked at the mute was really confusing. His eyes were so bright, it was like looking at the most precious treasure in the world. Ji Hyuxiao subconsciously clenched his hands into fists. At this point, the topic could no longer proceed as he originally thought. He put all his attention on Fu Wenzi, so he ignored the mute president. Anyone who sees the data and list that Tang Wan presented will know that she is extremely sincere, and if she still insists on her age, it would be too unreasonable. Thinking of this, Ji Hyuxiao realized that the situation was over and he could only grit his teeth and accept it. The matter of entering the national team has never been related to the high school department. After all, they are already 16 or 17 years old and are not suitable for training anymore. So, this time, the junior high school has to provide the remaining list of candidates for the national team. 88%, 22 people are needed. 22. Where can Ji Hyuxiao find 22 people for them? In the past, there were only 1 or 2 students in the junior high school. Ji Hyuxiao slowly opened his smiling eyes. He looked at Tang Wan, who was as usual, with a hint of gloom in his eyes. This little mute is more difficult to deal with than he imagined. Just as a dark emotion emerged in his heart, a pair of cold eyes locked onto him. Ji Huxiao subconsciously looked behind Tang Wan. Fu Wenzi didn't know when his eyes fell on him. This was the first time Ji Huxiao saw herself in Fu Wenzi's eyes. This moment. It makes his hair stand on end. I'm sorry, I feel a little uncomfortable today, so I will just add another chapter. I will find time to make up for it later. Good night, dear friends. Woo woo, I hate the change of seasons. When the seasons change, my rhinitis will relapse.